Snow was falling sideways, the kind of storm that didn't simply cover the world, but consumed it. Wind howled like a living thing, rattling the glass walls of the mansion perched above the frozen hills of the Hudson Valley. The house glowed faintly through the whiteout, a lone beacon resisting the darkness. Inside, warmth existed, but it did not feel like comfort. Ethan Calloway sat in the great room, a half-burned fire whispering low in the stone hearth. The orange flames flickered like something struggling to stay alive. Ethan watched them without really seeing them, his gaze distant, unfocused. The kind of stare of a man who had learned how to endure silence but had never truly made peace with it. 41 years old, billionaire, founder of a tech empire the world admired. His name appeared in business headlines the way a myth appears in holy books. Some compared him to visionaries, to revolutionaries, men who changed industries and futures. But none of that mattered now. Wealth didn't heat a home that felt empty. Success didn't rebuild a heart that had collapsed in on itself. He sat alone, fingers absently rubbing the edge of a glass, remembering nothing in particular, just the ache. The storm outside roared harder, slamming against the windows. The world wanted inside, but Ethan remained still, frozen in a quiet that felt endless. Then, a sound broke the stillness. A single electronic chime, soft, precise, out of place. The motion sensor alert. Not the front gate. Not the driveway. The service yard. The one area Ethan never ignored. His breath caught. He leaned forward, grabbed the phone beside him, the security feed opening with a swipe. Through swirling static and snow blur, a figure, or something like a figure, trembled near the dumpsters. The system had labeled it animal, but instinct cut through him like lightning. That was no animal. Atlas. His voice cracked the silence. The golden retriever stirred instantly from the rug near the fire, head lifting, ears angled, sensing the shift in the air. Atlas didn't bark. He just waited, muscles tense, ready. Ethan grabbed his coat, flashlight, boots. Movements that came not from thought but something older. He opened the door, and the cold hit him with the force of knives. Snow swallowed sound. His breath turned to frost. Atlas pressed at his side as they stepped into the white chaos. They moved together, man and dog, through the storm, the flashlight beam slicing through white turbulence. The wind pushed them back, but Ethan kept going, boots sinking deep into accumulated drifts. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if something unseen fought him, warning him to turn around. When he reached the service yard, the dumpster area was nearly invisible, half buried in snow. Then the beam of light touched something. A small bundle of fabric. So small he might have missed it. Atlas froze beside him, tail stiff, the growl low in his throat. Ethan stepped closer. The bundle moved. He dropped to one knee, the world narrowing to the little shape curled against metal and snow. A child. Tiny wrists zipped together with plastic ties. Tape across her mouth. Skin pale, lips nearly blue. Snow caked in her hair. His breath shattered. He ripped the tape from her lips with trembling hands. Her voice came in a whisper so faint it almost wasn't sound at all. "Please, don't let me die." Something inside Ethan broke open, a dam he had built carefully over years. He didn't think. He didn't question. He acted. He cut the restraints with his pocket knife, scooped her into his coat, pressed her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing, a ghost of a child, a memory someone tried to erase. He turned back toward the mansion, pushing through the storm, Atlas pacing close, guarding them. His lungs burned. His hands stung from the cold. The wind screamed as if furious at being defied. By the time he reached the door, his hands shook so violently he fumbled the key fob twice. He kicked the door open, warm air flooding around them. He fell to his knees, laying the girl near the fire, rubbing her arms, whispering words he didn't know he remembered how to speak. "You're safe now. Stay with me. Stay." Her eyelids flickered, breath thin and fragile. Outside, the storm raged on, a white, merciless oblivion. Inside, a heartbeat, small, quiet, but fighting, began to return. And Ethan Calloway, the man who had everything and nothing, realized in that moment he had never been afraid of losing himself. Until now, because for the first time in years, he needed someone to survive. The fire crackled louder now, throwing golden light across the marble floors, but the warmth felt too slow, like it was trying to catch up to a fading life. Ethan knelt beside the girl, his hands moving without hesitation, though every muscle in his body trembled. The storm outside continued to pound the windows, rattling the house like a beast trying to claw its way in. The little girl's skin was like ice, fragile, colorless. When he touched her cheek, it felt almost hollow, as if the cold had started to claim her from the inside. He wrapped her in a thick blanket from the couch, but her body didn't react. No shiver, no flinch, just stillness. That stillness terrified him. "Atlas," he whispered, and the golden retriever moved closer, lying beside her, his warm body pressing gently against her side. Instinct. Love. Protection. Animals knew what humans sometimes forgot. Ethan reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts with hands that refused to steady. When the familiar name appeared, he tapped it without thinking. Dr. Miranda Hayes answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Ethan, do you have any idea what— I found a child." His voice cracked on the word. "She's freezing. Zip ties, tape, she's barely breathing." There was no hesitation after that. "Don't rewarm her too fast," Miranda instructed, fully awake now, voice precise and controlled. "Wrap her core, not her arms or legs. Warm liquids only if she's conscious. Keep her close to heat, but not too close. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The call ended. Ethan moved to his knees again, hands cupping the girl's small face. Her lips parted slightly, a faint sound scraping out. "Please, he'll come for me." Ethan froze. Those 5 words didn't sound like fear. They sounded like memory. "Not here," he whispered, voice low, steady, almost like a vow. "No one will touch you here." Her breath hitched. It was the smallest reaction, but it meant she had heard him. Minutes passed like hours. Ethan spoke softly, nonsense words, gentle tones meant to anchor her to the world. Atlas rested protectively at her side, his head on his paws, eyes fixed on her as though daring death itself to come closer. A soft chime sounded from the hallway. The front door opened, followed by quick footsteps. Miranda entered still in her winter coat, snow melting in her hair. She knelt beside the girl immediately, stethoscope already in hand. "Severe hypothermia," she murmured. "She's been out there for hours." Her eyes flicked to Ethan. "Any idea who she is?" "No," Ethan whispered. "She said her name is Clara." Miranda's expression softened, only for a moment. Then her hands moved briskly, checking injuries. When she reached the girl's arms, she stopped. The skin there was a map of raised pale scars, deliberate lines, like someone had carved warnings into her. Not accidents, not neglect, punishment. Miranda's jaw tightened. Ethan felt something inside him coil, sharp and cold. Clara stirred again, eyelids fluttering. Her gaze found Ethan's, not Miranda's, not Atlas's. His. A child should not have eyes like that. Eyes that had seen too much. Eyes that understood danger the way most understood night and day. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The fear in her eyes said everything. Someone had tried to erase her. Someone expected her to stay erased. But here she was, breathing again, however faintly, in the home of a man who had buried his heart years ago. And without realizing it, he felt something shift inside him, quiet but undeniable. Not pity, not responsibility, purpose. The storm still battered the world outside, relentless and merciless, but inside a different storm was beginning. One made of memory, fury, and something dangerously close to hope. Clara's voice broke through the silence, barely audible, barely real. He said if I screamed, the snow would swallow me. Ethan didn't look away. Not now, not ever again. Not anymore, he whispered, because whether he understood it fully or not, her life was now tied to his. The storm finally began to quiet outside, but inside the mansion the air felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Miranda worked with clinical precision, wrapping Clara in warmed blankets, rubbing circulation back into her limbs, checking for frostbite. Ethan hovered near, steady but silent, like a man afraid that if he blinked, she might disappear back into the storm. Clara's breathing had grown steadier, but her eyes stayed half open, unfocused, drifting like someone caught between worlds. Her fingers curled into the fabric of the blanket as though she expected it to be taken from her at any second. Miranda spoke softly, her voice gentle but firm. She'll need rest, food, warmth, a safe environment. But Ethan, she paused, studying him. This wasn't an accident. Someone meant for her not to survive that storm. Ethan's jaw tightened. I know. Miranda hesitated as though there was something more she wanted to say, but the girl stirred, cutting her off. Clara tried to sit up. A tiny whimper escaped her lips as pain twisted across her face. Ethan knelt immediately, hands raised, not touching her, just there. Easy, he said, voice low, steady. You're safe now. You don't have to move. For 1 second, one fragile second, she looked at him. Really looked. Her eyes were gray like storm clouds reflecting winter light. Eyes that didn't belong to a child. Eyes that had learned to measure danger before trust. Atlas lifted his head, ears perked, sensing the shift. Slowly, he inched closer, placing his head gently on the edge of the blanket. Clara stared at him. At first terror, then confusion, then the smallest crack in her defenses. Her fingers trembled toward him, inch by inch, as if expecting teeth instead of warmth. Atlas didn't move except to blink, patient, loyal, waiting for her permission. When her hand finally landed in his fur, something in the room shifted. A thread of life. A thin, shaking bridge between fear and something she had not felt in a long, long time. Safety. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders loosened. The storm inside her paused, just a little. Miranda exhaled quietly. Ethan felt the air return to his lungs. But then Clara's gaze drifted past the dog, past the fire, to the tall windows where snow still lashed the glass. Her voice, when it came, was barely a sound at all. He said, "No one would find me," she whispered. He said no one remembers girls like me. Ethan didn't realize his hands had curled into fists. Who? Miranda asked softly. Clara didn't answer with words. Instead, she lifted her arm, just enough for the sleeve to fall back. The scars on her skin were not random. They were lines burned and healed, forming a shape. A pattern, a symbol, a mark. Ethan felt something like ice slide down his spine. He had seen that symbol before. A memory flashed, years ago, signature on a donation contract, a handshake at a gala, a smiling man beneath a banner that read, Reed Foster Foundation, every child deserves a chance. The world had applauded them. He had funded them. His voice came out so low it was barely breath. I know who did this. Clara froze. Her small hand tightened in Atlas's fur, knuckles white. Miranda looked at Ethan sharply. You're certain? He nodded once, slow, heavy. Clara didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She simply closed her eyes. That was somehow worse, because that silence said everything. She already knew. The monster had a name. The rest of the night passed in fragments, shadows shifting, firelight flickering, the mansion breathing with a quiet tension that felt alive. Clara slept lightly, each breath a fragile thread that could snap if touched too suddenly. Atlas refused to leave her side. Ethan didn't either. He stayed seated on the floor, back against the sofa, eyes fixed on the small rise and fall of her chest. Miranda slipped away to make calls, to arrange equipment, to speak in a voice too low for Clara to hear. Ethan didn't ask who she called. He already knew. You didn't find a child like this and report it as an accident. You prepared for war. The storm outside finally eased near dawn, but the silence it left behind was thick, unnatural. a stillness broken only by the distant groan of trees shifting under snow. Ethan rose stiffly, bones aching from hours on the floor, and crossed to the tall windows. The world outside was white, endless, unmarked, until his eyes followed the driveway. 2 tracks, fresh, linear, too deliberate to be snowplows, too narrow to be staff. Someone had been there, recently. His breath fogged the glass as he stared. The cold from outside felt like it was pressing against him through the window, crawling under his skin. He didn't turn when Miranda entered behind him. He didn't need to. "You see it too," she said quietly. He nodded once. Miranda's face was drawn, not afraid but aware. That brand of seriousness reserved for doctors and soldiers. People who know how easily life can be taken. "We need to involve someone who understands what this is," she said. "Alan Morris," Ethan replied immediately. Miranda didn't ask how he knew. Morris had been the only cop Ethan had ever respected, the one who didn't look away when he should have. The one who chased truth, even when it led into shadows. Miranda left the room to make the call. Ethan stood alone for a long moment, watching the endless white outside. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost. A man who had been waiting for something to break him open, and finally, that something had come. Behind him, a soft sound. A whimper. He turned instantly. Clara was awake again, but she wasn't looking at him or the fire or Atlas. She was staring at the far window. The huge one. The one that looked out over the trees. Her entire body had gone tense, rigid. Breath halted in her chest. Her lips parted, barely. "He's here." Ethan crossed the space between them in seconds, dropping to his knees beside her. "No," he whispered, voice steady enough to anchor ships. "No one is getting to you here?" But Clara didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Didn't move. "His coat," she whispered. "It smells like fire. Like gasoline." Atlas let out a low growl. Not at her. At the glass. Ethan turned. At first there was nothing. Just the white trees. Then, a shape. Not a person. A suggestion of one. A dark figure half hidden among snow-heavy branches. Still, watching. Not approaching. Not fleeing. Just waiting. Ethan reached slowly for the drawer under the console table. His fingers closed around cold metal. The revolver felt heavier than it used to. Miranda re-entered the room and froze when she saw the look on Ethan's face. Without a word, she moved to Clara and guided her gently away from the window, Atlas pressing himself against the girl's side like a shield. Ethan stepped closer to the glass, not enough to be seen. Just enough to see, but the figure was gone. Only disturbed snow remained. Miranda's voice was barely audible. "They came to see if she survived." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't lower the gun. He stared into the trees as though his gaze alone could burn through them. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but forged in steel. "They think she's property. They think she's replaceable. They think no one will come for her." His jaw clenched. "They're wrong." Outside, the world lay silent under miles of white snow. But inside the mansion, something had awakened. Something that would not sleep again. Morning crept into the house slowly, pale and thin, filtering through the frost-bitten windows like light afraid to disturb the quiet. The storm had passed, but the world it left behind looked stripped and cold, like a stage swept clean after a tragedy no one saw happen. Clara slept again, curled into Atlas like she was trying to disappear inside his warmth. The dog didn't move except to occasionally lift his head and sniff the air, alert to dangers only animals understand. Miranda rested in an armchair nearby, exhaustion written into the slump of her shoulders. She hadn't gone home. Neither had Ethan. Ethan stood in the study, surrounded by technology meant for defense. Security feeds, thermal scans, movement logs. Except the feed from the night before was corrupted, static where there should have been shapes, black streaks where light should have caught motion. Someone hadn't just trespassed. Someone had disabled his system. And they had done it elegantly, like they had studied his defenses. Like they knew him. A cold certainty settled into Ethan's chest, deeper than anger, heavier than fear. This wasn't random. This was targeted. He zoomed in on a single recovered frame, a sliver of a vehicle. Snow-smeared, nearly featureless. But the taillight shape was distinctive. A black van. No plates, no branding. The kind used by contractors who didn't want to be found. The Reed Foster Foundation had fleets of them. He stared at the screen so long that Miranda's voice startled him. "You've seen that model before." He didn't turn. He didn't need to. His voice came out low even. "Yes." Miranda stepped beside him. Her eyes flicked to the screen. She didn't breathe for a moment. "We need Morris," she said again. "Not suggestion, fact," Ethan nodded. Detective Alan Morris arrived just after noon. He didn't knock. Ethan had given him access codes years ago in the unspoken language of men who had seen too many things end badly. Snow clung to his coat and eyebrows. He looked like the storm had tried to bury him and failed. He looked at Clara first, always. His expression changed. Not pity. Not shock. Recognition. "What did they do to you?" he murmured, but it wasn't a question. He already knew. He turned to Ethan. "Start from the beginning." They stood in the study, Miranda seated with Clara nearby, Atlas positioned like a sentinel. Ethan told him everything. What he saw on the camera, the zip ties, the tape, the scars. Morris didn't interrupt. He just listened, pen unmoving in his hand because he wasn't writing this down. He didn't need to. When Ethan finished, Morris exhaled through his nose like he was trying to push a boulder back down a hill. "Ethan," he said quietly, "this matches 6 cases I wasn't supposed to look into." Miranda stiffened. Clara's breathing hitched. Ethan didn't move. Morris continued. "Kids disappeared from foster homes, shelters, hospital transfers. On paper, every one of them was relocated. No red flags. No follow-ups. No investigations." He tapped the side of his head lightly. "But when you do this job long enough, you learn to hear what's missing." His voice hardened. Their files didn't vanish. They were erased, professionally, cleanly, someone with access. Someone with influence. Clara flinched. Morris crouched down to her level. Not close, not invasive. Just near. "Clara," he said gently, "I'm going to ask something. You don't have to answer if you don't want to." Her eyes were wide, glassy, but steady. "Do you remember the smell? The place they took you from?" She swallowed. "Metal," she whispered. "And fuel. And cold air. Always cold." Morris nodded slowly like she had confirmed something very specific. "A loading yard," he muttered. "Freight carriers. Not residential. Industrial." Ethan's voice cut through the room, a blade of sound. "They moved children like cargo." Morris didn't look away. "Yes." Silence thickened until it tasted like iron. Clara's voice, small but pointed, entered it. "He said no one ever comes back for us." Her chin trembled. "But you came?" Ethan didn't realize he was moving until he knelt beside her. "No one takes you again," he said. "Not a promise. A verdict." Atlas leaned into Clara stronger as if sealing it. Miranda wiped her cheek discreetly. Morris stood up. "All right," he said quietly. "Then we're not handling this as a rescue." He met Ethan's eyes, 2 men who had seen war in different forms. "We're handling this as a takedown." And for the first time since the storm began, the room didn't feel cold. It felt ready. Night came early, settling over the Hudson Valley like a curtain of ink. The snow outside reflected the moonlight in a cold shimmer, turning the world silver and silent. The mansion lighting was dim now, soft lamps instead of chandeliers, fire instead of overhead glare. Safety didn't need brightness. It needed gentleness. Clara sat on the couch wrapped in a knitted blanket Miranda had found in a cedar chest. The wool was too big for her, swallowing her tiny frame, but she held onto it like something precious, something earned. Atlas was pressed to her side, watching her the way knights watch queens, vigilant, steady, unquestioning. She wasn't drawing bridges anymore. Now she was drawing a woman, hair pulled back, eyes soft, hands reaching for her, Evelyn, her mother. Miranda sat across from her, careful not to crowd the space. "Can you tell me about her?" she asked softly. Clara didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her pencil spoke for her, heavy shading under the mother's eyes, as if exhaustion had been her only companion. Then, slowly, she added a second drawing, herself, much smaller, fingers reaching up. But there was distance between the two figures, an empty space, wide and white. Miranda's throat tightened. Ethan watched from the doorway, one shoulder leaning against the frame, expression unreadable except for the flicker of pain he didn't bother to hide. She tried. Clara finally whispered. The words were fragile, like icicles that might shatter if touched. Miranda nodded. I believe you. Clara's eyes glistened. She blinked them clear. They said they were helping us. They said Mama wasn't safe to take care of me anymore. They made her sign papers. She cried. Her voice broke, but not like a sob. Like something had ripped open inside her. Ethan crossed the room before she felt herself fall into that fracture. He knelt down, not towering over her, not reaching for her, just present. A steady, rooted presence. Clara, he said softly. Do you remember the place? Where they took you first? She nodded slowly. It was a building with gray walls. No windows. A hallway with green doors. They said it was temporary. Only until I learned to be quiet. Her fingers tightened around the pencil. Not angry. Just remembering pain the way bones remember breaks. Ethan didn't blink. Didn't recoil. Miranda exhaled softly. That sounds like a transitional intake facility. I know those places. I've consulted in a few. They're supposed to be for children moving homes safely. Clara's voice hollowed. They lied. Ethan didn't speak. Didn't need to. The words etched themselves into him like carving into stone. Alan Morris entered then, his expression taut with something grimly triumphant. I have something, he said, voice low. And you need to see it. He placed a stack of printouts onto the coffee table. Not files, photographs, children, different faces, different ages, all with the same vacant look in their eyes, the look of being erased. Clara's hand moved instinctively toward the papers, but Ethan gently placed his hand over them, shielding her. Not for her, he murmured. Morris nodded. Right, but Clara already understood, her eyes lifted. Clear now. He didn't take just me, she whispered. No, Morris confirmed. There are dozens. Clara didn't cry. Instead, she sat up straighter, as if something inside her was rearranging itself, turning from victim into witness. Into truth. Into proof. Miranda watched her with awe and heartbreak tangled together. Ethan realized something then. Something enormous. Clara was not just a child who needed saving. She was the key to everything. Her memory. Her voice. Her survival. She wasn't just the reason he had to fight. She was the reason he had to win. Atlas pressed closer to her. Protective. The fire popped softly in the hearth. Embers glowing like small stars. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, but inside, the thaw had begun. The days that followed felt like standing inside the quiet before an earthquake, an unnatural calm, a stillness that hummed with tension beneath every breath. The mansion, once a monument to silence and loneliness, was now filled with movement. Papers spread across tables, maps pinned to walls, names whispered, evidence gathered. But despite the growing storm of action, the atmosphere around Clara was gentle, deliberately soft. She spent her mornings sitting on the floor near the fire with Atlas, drawing with slow concentration. Ethan didn't ask what she drew anymore. He simply waited. Because the world she was rebuilding on paper was the world she remembered. And the world she remembered was where the truth lived. One afternoon, the pencil stopped. Clara stared at the page for a long time before she spoke. He had a ring. Ethan looked up, sharply. Morris set down his coffee mid-sip. Miranda froze in the doorway. Clara's voice was steady, not strong, not bold, but steady, like something long buried finally claiming its shape. It had a symbol on it. The same as the mark? Here. She touched the inside of her forearm, where the faint pattern of scars remained. Morris leaned in. Can you draw it? Clara didn't hesitate. Her hand moved with a fluency that did not belong to a child who had been silenced. It moved like memory finally releasing itself. A circle. 3 triangles. A line splitting the center. Miranda inhaled sharply. That's not just a logo. That's a crest. Ethan's voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. The Reed Foster crest. Board member insignia. Clara nodded once, tiny and solemn. He said it meant we belonged to them. The room did not move. No one breathed, because now this wasn't rumor. Not theory. Not suspicion. It was identification. It was witness. It was evidence. Morris stood slowly, the weight of the moment sinking into his posture. This is enough to move. Search warrants, seizures, records, and if we're lucky, names. Ethan didn't blink. Not lucky, precise, but Clara wasn't looking at Morris. She wasn't looking at Ethan. Her gaze had gone distant again, but not lost. Focused. He didn't work alone, she whispered. There were others in the hallway. Women with badges. They talked like they were helping. Like we should be grateful. They said children like us get forgotten anyway. They said, no one ever comes back for the broken ones. Miranda crossed the room and knelt beside her, not touching, just present. The way one kneels in the presence of something sacred. You are not broken, she said softly. Clara turned her head slowly, meeting her eyes. No, she agreed. I'm not. It wasn't defiance. It was truth. A whisper the world had tried to crush out of her and failed. Ethan felt something in his chest tighten, not pain, but the kind of pressure that precedes transformation. The realization that his life had split into before and after, and this was the moment that divided the two. He stood. Morris followed. Plans formed. Calls were made. Authority shifted like tectonic plates. Somewhere out there, a man in a tailored suit who had built an empire of stolen futures had no idea the ground beneath him had already begun to crack. But Clara didn't watch any of this. She walked to the window, blanket trailing softly behind her, Atlas at her side. Outside, the snow was melting in slow, irregular rivulets, water carving through ice like veins returning to flesh. The world was thawing, and with it, so was she. Not all the way. Not yet. Healing isn't a sunrise. It's the slow return of warmth after the longest night. But she stood. She breathed. She remembered. And she spoke. That was more powerful than rescue. That was reclamation. Ethan watched her profile silhouetted against the pale winter light and knew. The storm that mattered was no longer outside. It was about to break inside the world of the men who thought she belonged to them. And this time, they would be the ones left out in the cold. The takedown did not happen loudly. Evil rarely ends in an explosion. It ends in a silence that is finally earned. 3 weeks later, the courtroom was packed. Cameras, reporters, murmurs like rising wind. But the noise was outside the core of the moment. Inside, at the center of everything, sat Clara. Not in the audience. Not on the witness stand. Near the window. In the sunlight. Her small hand rested in her mother's, fingers linked the way roots link underground. Quiet, unseen, stronger than stone. Evelyn's hair was still thin, her voice still soft, her steps still cautious, but her eyes were awake now, alive, present. She never let go of Clara's hand. Not once. Miranda sat beside them, not as doctor, but as something closer to family. Atlas lay at Clara's feet, his head resting on her sneakers as if to say he would tear the world apart if it ever tried to take her again. And Ethan stood nearby, not towering, not shielding, simply there, solid as a foundation stone. At the center of the room was Jonathan Reed, the philanthropist, the benefactor, the man whose smile had charmed cities. He no longer smiled. His hands were bound. His jaw was tight. But most telling of all was the flicker of disbelief in his eyes, astonishment that the world had seen through him at last. Money buys silence. Power buys blindness. But truth, when spoken by the ones the world forgot, has a gravity nothing can escape. Morris presented evidence, witness statements, transfer papers with names blacked out but still traceable, shipping records, burner phones, room inspections at facilities no one was supposed to notice. And then, Clara's drawings, not shown to the court, not held up like spectacle, just submitted quietly into record, because they were not illustrations. They were testimony, pictures of hallways, of doors, of the ring, of the crest, of the man in the gasoline-scented coat. The prosecution didn't need to dramatize anything. The truth was heavy enough. When Evelyn spoke, the courtroom leaned closer without realizing it. Her voice trembled at first, but then found the strength rooted in every mother who has ever fought the dark. They told me I was unfit. They told me signing the papers was love. They told me she would be safe. Her hand tightened around Clara's. They lied. No anger. Just truth. And truth is what shattered Reed's defense. Not shouting. Not hatred. Just a mother reclaiming her child. The verdict came down like winter ice giving way to spring. Guilty. On every count. No applause followed. Just silence. The kind of silence that mends. Outside, cameras flashed, headlines spread, and the world tried to understand how something so monstrous could hide behind charity. But inside the mansion that evening, there were no television screens. No reporters. No tension. Clara sat at the kitchen island, flour dusting her hands, learning how to shape cookie dough with Miranda's guidance. Evelyn stood beside her, laughing, really laughing, the kind that came from somewhere deep. Atlas trotted around proudly, wearing a lopsided ribbon Clara had insisted made him look very official. Ethan watched from the doorway, not intruding, not leading, just present. For the first time in years, the house didn't echo. It lived. Later, when Clara grew tired and curled against Atlas on the couch, Ethan stepped outside onto the balcony. The snow had begun to melt into shimmering patches, the world no longer white with silence but dappled with returning earth. The wind was gentle now. He heard quiet footsteps behind him. Clara. She didn't say anything. She simply reached out her hand. He took it. Her voice was barely a whisper. We didn't freeze. He felt something warm loosen inside his chest, something he hadn't known was locked there. No, he said. We didn't. The storm had not been defeated in one night. It had been endured, survived, transformed, and now, like the world beneath the thawing snow, they were beginning again.